WineCAST is brought to you by J. Hilburn Menswear. Local style advisor Therese Nelson will meet with you at your home or office to show you the complete line. From custom shirts to jeans and sweaters, and even for you ladies, there are gift cards. Perfect for the holidays or special occasions. For more information or to schedule an appointment with Therese, visit her at theresenelson.jhilburn.com. So welcome back, everyone. I'm Jessica Bell from My Wine School, where it is wine your way. We've done WineCAST number 19 and 20 on to number 21. And everyone say hello to Karen. She's over there sipping on the tawnies and making sure that those get enough exposure tonight. And if you want to say hi to Karen, don't know how, here's how you do it. You just go to our homepage where we're broadcasting live. Off to the right is where you can join the conversation. Under audience, just type something in. It'll take you to this screen. You can either log in or sign up. And then if you decide to sign up today, it's 5 different fields. And then boom, you are a part of the conversation. So, like I said, we're on WineCAST number 21, and you know I'm getting serious if I put my hair back. So it's game on now. And this is a WineCAST that's made for our wine gurus. These are, this is, like I said, think about this as like your weekly tasting group. And I love these ones because this is like, what do I want to know more about? So what really intrigued me about port was, are there house styles? So we've really talked a lot about port in the last 2 WineCASTs, and now I want to see if there are house styles. And if it gets a little hairy today, it's either I've been using too much of the prop, or you need to go back and check out WineCAST number 19 and 20. Perhaps if it starts to get a little out of your realm, then go back and check out those other ones, because we're going to get a little bit more technical in this one for our wine gurus. So we're going to open a new one. We've been using the 6 grapes, but now we've got the Taylor Fladgate, which we've talked about the idea of fine ruby, so you can see that there, in script, so it looks so nice. But it's really their entry-level ruby-style port, and you see Porto. So this is Taylor Fladgate special. I'm sorry, it should say fine ruby on the description down there, but it isn't non-vintage, meaning it comes from several vintages, and you guys know all that now because we just did WineCAST number 20. So what are we going to do today? Like I said, we're going to talk about house styles, and these are such big styles that it's very rare that I think you have 2 ports next to each other, and because they're so big, it's hard to understand or to hone in on nuances. And so what I wanted to see was, are there styles from house to house? And the fact that most of these products from port are what we call non-vintage, meaning they're a blend of vintages, make them great candidates for what we call house styles. If you think about another product that does a lot of non-vintage wines, it would be champagne or sparkling wines. And they are renowned for having certain house styles, meaning from house to house you see a difference. And the reason they can do that is they can blend, when you're blending vintages, you can blend out different vintage differences, right? Because each vintage is different, but when you have several vintages, you can really blend that out. And so it's really common when you have blended vintages to have what we call a house style. So I just want to, disclaimer that this information that's going to come out of this WineCAST is based on some reading and a lot of drinking. So they're my personal views, but I actually want to know, do you guys have a favorite port? Do you have a house, Karen, that you prefer more than others?
Well, I was recently just in Porto in the Douro Valley.
Oh, okay. We've got our port expert.
Well, we stayed actually in the Douro Valley at a vineyard, Quinta de Vallado. And even though they specialize more in table wines, I loved their port. Mm-hmm. It was excellent. But I think besides that, Optima. I really like them as well.
Right. Optima is Warres, Warres. It's their tawny style port. It's kind of like meant to appeal to a younger crowd. But what Karen mentioned, I also want to pull up something you mentioned. You said quinta. You stated a quinta. Now, a quinta is the equivalent of an estate or a property. If we pull up that picture of Portugal, this is the what we call the Douro River, okay? And this river empties into the Atlantic Ocean, but then it goes really far inland. It actually goes all the way to Spain. And we've got, on the left, we've got the town of Oporto, where port takes its name for, and because it's a port as well. And then on the right is Villanova de Gaia. Now, if you go down this river, what you'll start to find are vineyards, and those are where you find the quintas. here in Villanova de Gaia, close to the port, you find the lodges where the port is aged. But once you go down this river, you're going to find the quinta. So quinta means estate in Portuguese. So that was a great point as well. And you have, it's interesting, you have a lot of big houses in Portugal. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. And then you have these smaller ones that we don't see a lot of, unfortunately. We're going to focus on the more commercial ones today because that's what you're going to tend to see in the marketplace. But gosh, I wish we could all go to Portugal with Karen and live it up there, because that is the best way to really experience the area. So anyone saying they have a favorite port out there?
No one's coming in with a favorite port.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult, for me, I have one that is a go-to for me. It's called Smith Woodhouse, and it's a smaller producer. But it's interesting because Smith Woodhouse is actually what's called a second string. It's not considered in the upper echelon of port producers. But what they've got is this LBV, late bottle vintage port that can age. Okay, so go back to WineCAST number 20 if you don't know what I'm talking about. But it's a late bottle vintage port that can age, and you can get it for about $20-25. If Sue Aiken's still watching, I know you guys like it. It is a fantastic deal. And so the reason why I bring that up is because even though you're going to find house styles, what you're going to see is each of these houses are going to have their product that really makes them unique, or really is their what they do really well. So Karen talked about Wars. Does a great tawny. It's really renowned. The Otima, O-T-I-M-A, is really renowned as being a great tawny port. And then the Smith Woodhouse, I love their late bottle vintage. So, and great. I call it the poor man's vintage port. For $25, you get a taste of what it tastes like to have a vintage port. So it's a lot of fun. So let's see. What we want to do is talk about these house styles, and then see if we can figure out some of it by drinking. Of course, that's how I like to understand wine. Now, as I mentioned, we've got Taylor Fladgate. It's the fine ruby port, and it's a non-vintage. So I will say that most of your port styles, you're going to better understand them with the vintage ports. That said, our budget doesn't allow for having one, let alone two vintage ports on the table, which would be about $100 a piece. So we're going to be dealing with the ruby and special rubies from these different houses. Now, how do we go understanding that? Well, let's transport ourselves back to Portugal. And, it would be great if I could get a green screen. Then we could actually, green screen, it goes behind you and it looks like you're actually there. We could, step into it one of these days when I really, hit the big time, guys. But what we want to do is also maybe go back 300 years too. So while we're doing it, while we're transporting ourselves, let's go back another 300 years. And at the 1700s in Portugal was an important time for the establishment of the port industry. It was at this time that an important treaty was signed between Portugal and England, and it really solidified their business relationship. And it was because England was really mad at France. They were doing something called the 100 Years' War. Right? That's definitely a significant argument. And also the English love alcohol, or rather they love wine, red wine. So they said, okay, let's solidify this partnership. And what that did is it provided for the establishment of security of saying, okay, English, you can start building some businesses here. And how did it start? A lot of people, a lot of English and Scottish and Northern Europeans came down to Portugal and established different businesses at the port. So Porto, or right at the port on the Douro River, was a great place for it. And these were called shippers. They shipped everything. They shipped everything from wine to cod to textiles, whatever it was. And so that's how it started, and that's why we often refer to these different houses as shippers, okay? They shipped wine to start with. But as they stayed and stuck around, they got more and more involved, and they went down this river, and they started to get to the vineyards, and they got more and more involved with the production, less of just shipping and more of how to make the wine and how to age the wine. And this this market is really based on brands. And you've got a number of brands, but what's interesting is that you see a lot of brands under the same companies. It's really interesting, which makes it even that much more interesting whether there's house styles or not. And you'll see what I mean in a second. So, for instance, this port, actually not, the port that we had earlier was called Graham's. Now there's a family called the Symington family, or I mean, now it's a company, but it is, don't quote me on it. They might still be family owned. Don't quote me on it. But anyways, it's Symington family. They own a number of different port houses, of which include Graham's, Wars, and Dow's. They own all of them. So it's like if there isn't a distinct house style, they're like competing against one another, right? I mean, it would seem kind of weird to own all these port houses that are really in direct competition with each other. Now, the other one that we have today is the Taylor Fladgate, and the Taylor Fladgate and Yeatman own Taylor's, Fonsecas, and Crofts. So with these 6 brands and these 2 basically companies, I would probably say in America, I'm totally throwing this crazy number out there, but 90% of the sales come from these 6 brands. I might be wrong on that, but the majority of the ports you find in the marketplace are going to come from one of these 6 brands. Now, I'm not saying they're the biggest companies, because France drinks a lot of port, as does England, and so there's companies that it's called So Grape, I think is one of them, that probably sell more. But for the U.S., these are the important ones. So we're going to deal with these today, and really, I'm going to try and break down the house styles for these 6 brands. It's going to be real oversimplified, but maybe give you some direction the next time you go to pick up a port wine. So let's see here. Let's actually go on to Wine IQ number 1. And didn't we do this one already? I think this one, you know what happened is I switched it. Shoot, I switched it. I switched the wrong one. So what was the wine?
Everyone should get this one right. Then.
Yeah, right. Go ahead and let me know what you think of this one. If you were in WineCAST number 19, this is a gimme. So let me know what you think of this one. But what was the WineCAST or Wine IQ? Well, let me tell you what I wanted to convey to you. I want to see if you guys are paying attention in the wine movie though. But what is important to know is that each of these shippers or houses or brands, they're going to source grapes from up to 30,000 different growers, and so that is going to make each of these different. So that was the question. The question was, what would be the contributing factors to different house styles? So one thing is where they get the grapes from. There we go. Now we're back on track. Where we get the grapes from. And with 30,000 growers of grapes in the Douro Valley, who they work with and what quintas they own will dictate a house style. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing is the winemaking team or the winemaker. They'll say, okay, do we want to extract a lot, and how do we want to extract it? The color and in general, how you make these wines, you got to extract a ton of color in a very short period of time before you add the brandy. So winemaking techniques, how do we age the wines? That would be another contributing factor to different house styles. And then finally, history. A lot of these have been around for about 200 years or more. And as a result, what you find is that history really helps dictate different house styles. So, did anyone actually answer this question?
Yep, we got some B's.
B's, you guys were paying attention. I love it. Okay, good. So, let's actually try this wine, and we're going to compare what we find on this wine, the Taylor Fladgate, to the 6 grapes to see if we can differentiate a little bit of different house styles between, say, maybe Graham's and Taylor Fladgates. So go ahead and take a look at the color of this wine. Now, ruby ports, I don't care where they're coming from. You're really not going to see a lot of difference between color. So they're both ruby ports. But how about on the nose? I actually get a lot of difference on the nose between the 6 grapes and the Taylor Fladgate. So you guys tell me what you smell on this one. And things I want you to focus in on are things like, is one fruitier than the other? That would be one thing that would be important. Or intensity of aromas. Are there any differences? Now, Kieran, what are you finding on the noses of the two?
I find the Fladgate a little less fruity, but more darker fruits.
Okay.
But I do find it more intense.
Okay, definitely.
Than the 6 grapes.
Okay, so Taylor Fladgate's less fruity but more intense. Okay, and more intense would suggest quality. More intensity would suggest quality. Is anyone coming in and telling us what they got on this one?
Not yet.
Okay. I don't know if a lot of people wanted to open 2 bottles of port tonight, so I don't blame you. It's interesting because what Karen said is that Taylor Fladgate is more intense, and actually Taylor Fladgate is known for being higher quality. In fact, Taylor Fladgate is known as like the Grand Cru or the first growth of ports. It tends to be more of this quality. It's got a great reputation. So does Graham's though. But Graham's is actually, I agree, Graham's, the 6 grapes we have here, lots of fruit. Really, really ripe, very approachable. Whereas the Taylor Fladgate, you still get fruit and dark fruit, but you also get like some savory notes, and the fruit is a little bit more in the background. So this might help us understand a little bit of house styles, but let's break it down again. We've got these 2 major houses with let's say 6 different brands under the 2 houses, and what Karen just said is that for the Grahams, it's a little bit fruitier, and she's right. That's usually what Graham's is known for, as is Fonseca and Croft. And some people use the word opulent or approachable. It's just fruitier. Now, if we compare that to Taylor Fladgate, it's less fruity. We saw that on the nose. And some people would use elegant or perfumed. And Wars and Dows for the Symington family are known that way, as is Taylor Fladgate's. So great. Karen hit the nail there. Let's go ahead and try the wine now and see if we see any differences on the wine. So if you've got one of them, just take a sip of whatever you got at this point. And what I want you to focus on now are things like alcohol. Now, both of them are going to have a lot of alcohol. Both of them are going to have 20% or more or less. But how does the wine handle the alcohol? And then I want you to focus on tannin, as well as body, and also fruit. Are you getting more or less fruit on these? Now, that's a lot to focus in on.
Maybe while they're thinking about that, I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
First off, are there estate bottle ports or mostly house ports, or is there a difference?
There is a difference. Great question. So what you've got are, they're called Quinta bottled ports or Quinta ports. And yes, you have big houses like that we just saw. Here, I'll pull up some of those for you again. Let's go back to this one here. Oops. Here it is. Okay. So these are some of the houses. These are big houses. Now what I'll say is within the big houses, they each have their prized quintas. And so some of them will have quinta bottled ports as well. Under the umbrella, I should say, of a big brand. But then you also have small quintas that are bottling their own port. And what's interesting is they, as long as they have really high quality, they will declare a vintage more often than the big houses. The big houses tend to do it every 3 years or so. And every 3 years, 3 times a decade. So every 3 years would be the average. But really 3 times a decade is when you see vintage ports being declared. Whereas a small quinta bottling their own port or really running their own business might declare more vintages because the quality level is going to be higher. It's smaller production, but the quality is going to be higher for what they're making. Any other questions?
Yeah. How long will open port last?
Great question. How long will open port last? It's going to change based on the style that we're dealing with. So when you're looking at, say, a ruby style port, usually at least a week, if not 3 weeks, up to 4 weeks. And what I tell people is drink it till you don't like it anymore. It's really not going to hurt you. It's got so much alcohol in it that it's not going to go bad. Like really bad really quickly, but it'll be okay. What's going to happen is it's just going to go down in flavor. So at one point the alcohol is just going to be too much. There's going to be no flavor and lots of alcohol. But a tawny port, on the other hand, in the refrigerator can last at least a month and even longer. And it's because it's an intentionally oxidized style. So more oxygen is not going to do a whole lot of damage to it. So those can last a long time. Now the ones that can't age a long time are your vintage ports or anything bottled like a vintage port. So if it's sealed with a cork, you want to drink it within 2 days, just like you would any fine wine. You're going to lose most of what you have on it. And then if it's a vintage port and it's really old, you're looking at like 2 hours. The older it is, you've got kind of, again, the bell curve again. But, once it's 20, 30 years old, you don't want to have it sit in a decanter. Now, if it's a 2003 vintage port, which is very young for a vintage port, then you could stand it, decant it a little longer. But something that's 1970 or even maybe 1980, you don't want to wait too long on that one. Any other questions?
Just one more. Where does Sandeman Port stand?
Yep.
Between them?
Yep. Sandeman Port is actually going to be part of So Grape. I'm almost positive it's part of So Grape. Yeah. I'm almost positive it's part of So Grape, which is a big company. And Sandeman, the style, I'm not overly familiar with, I'll say. I know that they're big in sherry in Spain as well, but I actually haven't had a lot of their port, so I would be speaking from inexperience, and I don't want to do that. So that's on my list of things to do. But I'm sure it's great. I'm not even gonna say anything. I'm not gonna go down the road, because if I don't have the right experience, I've learned my lesson a long time ago. Don't get into uncharted territory. So, any other questions?
No.
Okay, cool. Great questions. That's the thing. Port has a lot of, I think, a lot of mystery, a lot of how do I serve it, how long can I keep it, all those types of things. What are the styles? So hopefully tonight really helped clarify a lot of that for you. Now, go ahead and take a sip of the wine if you haven't already. And did anyone come in on alcohol, tannin, body? Okay. Yeah, like I said, I don't think a lot of people bought 2 bottles of port.
No, well, a few people couldn't, said that their store didn't have this bottle.
Yeah.
So it's hard to do the comparison.
Right. And that's, we really need one bottle, and, just sip on that one bottle that you have, and we'll get you to the right conclusion, and you can do a comparative tasting with any of these brands. Then go out and buy them and see if it holds true for you. I mean, these, again, are just huge overgeneralizations that might help in the buying process, but they're not meant to be the final word on these port houses.
Brian just came in with,
yep.
He said this one has better balance and more pleasant to him.
Okay, great. So Brian mentioned the Taylor Fladgate, and yeah, more balance, it carries its alcohol better, which goes to show its quality. Like I said, Taylor Fladgate is known as the first growth. Now that said, this is only their fine ruby, so we're not going to expect a lot from it, because it is $12, and it's supposed to be a simple wine. But it's interesting, just comparing at this level, you might start to see one that has a little bit, it holds its alcohol a little better. But that's not to say you like this one better. It's just different, right? Because the Graham's is definitely fruitier again. And that style is very appealing to a lot of people, And this is the idea that sweeter, and this Graham's has got more alcohol. It's what we call fleshier. It's maybe a more positive way of saying what Graham's has versus this Taylor Fladgate. It's sweeter and fleshier. And so Graham's, Fonseca, and Croft would fall into that camp. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, you have drier styles. So if you are already kind of shying away from port because they're too sweet for you, check out some of these styles. Wars is one of the top brands under the Symington family. Dow is known for being one of the driest style ports. It's still a port, so it's still going to be sweet. Don't get me wrong. You're not going to get a dry wine on Dow. But for port, it's going to be on the sweeter side. And then Taylor, like I said, is for the Taylor Fladgate family, the top of the ladder there. Fonseca also is really has a great reputation. And in fact, Fonseca, from what I've read, I don't know if you saw this when you were in Portugal, Karen, but it tends to be one of the locals' favorites. It tends to be one that Portuguese like of, say, these 6 brands. So I don't know, the last time I was in Portugal, it was a long time ago, so I don't remember much. And I'm just going to blame it on not being there for a while. We'll just end it at that. So we're at the end of time. I don't know if there's any more questions on the chat roll there.
Christine just wants to know, are there any good white ports you recommend?
Yes. It's amazing, white ports. I do a lot of port tastings, and what's interesting is that white port is always what I call the dark horse. I mean, I put it on Facebook today. It should be like the white horse, but it is one that people are often shy away from. And at first, I was like, white port, isn't it like just cheap, gross? No. It's a really interesting style. The reason is it's a little drier than the reds, and so it comes in, I would say, at like a medium dry, maybe a medium sweet level of sweetness rather than a sweet level, and it's chilled, so it takes down that perception of sweetness as well. Whenever you chill something sweet, it'll don't make it seem less. And it's got great complexity, and the prices are amazing. So Dow's has a great one. The only problem is finding these white ports is really tough. You really got to ask for it. I've been able to get my hands on them from the importers and not from the retailers, and that when I share them with people love them. They are the hit of the tasting. So check them, look for them, ask for them. You know, I mean, their white ports are really a lot more popular in places like France, where it's an aperitif, or in England, where it's again an aperitif, and it's chilled. It's a great something to have right before you eat. So you know what? It's up to you guys. You got to go to your retailer and ask for it, because if no one's asking for it, they're not going to push for it. And so it's got to go up the ladder. So it'll take a while, but that's something to ask for. So great question. Any other ones out there?
Kim was just asking about cheese pairings, and I just wrote into her that definitely blue cheeses, especially with the rubies, and the tawnies. I think you could even do with like a cheddar, cheddar or something.
Definitely, yeah. And what you've got is the sweetness from the port is going to go great with salty. So the saltier, so you mentioned an aged cheddar, is going to even be more concentrated, more salty, and that's why it goes so nicely. Same thing with a blue. Blues are typically by nature very, very salty, and so that's why you tend to find those as being really great pairing. So aged cheeses, you know, I wouldn't do a goat cheese, a fresh milk cheese. I wouldn't do those, although it'll work because you've got so much sweetness. But these are so big, and the intensity is so intense that you're really not gonna taste the cheese at the end of the day. So you really need a fully flavored cheese, lots of salt. Those are the two things you'd look for in your cheeses. So with those two resources or two pieces of information, I think you can go out to your cheese vendor and find some really fun pairings. And the great thing about this is you guys don't have to finish this bottle. I mean, you can tonight if you want, but the great thing is that this is gonna keep for a week. I mean, you could keep it for the holidays. I've got 3 bottles of port, and guess what we're drinking at Christmas. If it lasts that long. So how about anything else, Karen, on the chat roll?
No.
Okay.
That's about it.
Well, that's going to bring us to 8 o'clock, so we're going to sign off. I thank Karen for all the great recommendations tonight, and thank you guys. Next week we're going to actually be dealing with sparkling wine, so we can get you all prepped up for the New Year's, and you'll be able to tell all your friends exactly what you know about sparkling wines. So please tell your friends about what we're doing. We really rely on you guys to get the word out, and 2012 we're hoping is going to be a good year for us, and a good year for you as well. So I'm Jessica Bell from My Wine School, where it's wine your way, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thanks so much.